that we can finish that. And before I turn it over to Mo, um, I picked up this book off my shelf recently. It's a geography book, first published in 1924 as a high school curriculum. It actually belonged to my grandmother. And I don't know exactly how I got it, but I picked it up the other day and I noticed it was published 100 years ago. So I start flipping through, as it looks across the world, and this is not too detailed, but I'm imagining my grandmother, this is her world. That does not seem that long ago to me. And we live in times, as we all know, that the rate of change is accelerating even more. And so that alone can be a real inhibitor for preventing us to really be able to find a way forward and to know who we want to be in times that are always changing, circumstances that are always changing. It's really so helpful if we're able to have a core set of values and purpose that allow us to navigate remarkable change. And I'm excited about today's program and really excited that Mo will be leading us on that. Dan, do you want to walk us through some opening comments here?
Yeah, I would love to, if we can get the PowerPoint up and running.
You want to share that, Mo? And I'll see if I've made you. There we go.
All right. Thank you so much. Yes, and happy week after the 4th of July. So today's session is going to look at a number of different things. First, we want you to be able to understand and apply the personal line of sight process to help facilitate personal and client growth. And this is something that's really important. It's sort of a North Star guiding piece for your clients. Also, we want you to understand the 3 boxes coaching method, which is tied to line of sight, help clients identify the core values that they want to guide their decisions in their work and their life. Learn how to help clients define a clear vision for their desired future. And there's some self-discovery of your personal line of sight, something that we've all done. So we're looking at these fundamentals. Mo is going to take you through those. I want to go back, go ahead, and there we go. Thank you. Here's what we're looking at as far as the competencies that are covered. So for the ICF, facilitating client growth, and for WABC, facilitating personal transformation. Take a sec to take a look at those. Partnering, supporting, inviting, keywords in there, summarizing learning, and insight within and between the sessions. And of course, as always, we want to check in on how that's going. Focusing on goals. Okay, this is the personal transformation. I mean, it's all part of the process, or this is a very specific part of the process. Developing a plan, encouraging the client to keep focused on concerns. Ensuring the plan and development goals address their concerns and major areas of learning and development, and creating development goals that are specific, measurable, action-oriented, results-oriented, and have the appropriate time frame, hence SMART. With that, I'll turn it over to Mo to check in with you and move us forward. You're muted, Mo.
Okay, let's try this again. Good morning, everyone, and happy Monday. And this actually, this session came as a request from last session. Last session, we were talking about burnout and how do you prevent burnout, how do you help your client? And we kept coming back to is the way to help the client is to anchor them back into their story and their narrative and and their true north. In the design, interesting enough, this session and next session were supposed to be kind of like this add-on graduate course that after the first course ended, we will offer this one. So we pulled it back into this so that we can kind of work through that together. And so thank you for asking for things, and then you shall ask and we shall deliver. So we were going to talk about this, and it really fits back into this fundamental of the coaching conversation we had when we kicked up the program. And fundamentally, you know, I always talk about we can't control everything, but we can understand fundamentals. And the fundamentals in coaching are those 5 pieces: you, the coach, the coachee, the situations, the conversations, and then the terrain or the journey that they're on, and which really is what kind of encompasses the background of all of this. And so if we're coaching people on an individual situation using the U model, there's a bigger story behind it. And so how do we really fit it into that and bring it from the back to the forefront into the conversation? So this is really today's conversation, and it does fit into facilitating client growth, but also fits into coaching mindsets, communicating, evoking awareness, all of those aspects of things. What I would love to kind of just using the chat box, I want to take just a pause and kind of let you do a quick self-assessment on where you think you are on each one of those. So every time I talk about one, I want you to just put a number 1 through 10 in the chat box of where you think you are on each. So coaching mindset versus being in an advice mode. Where do you think you are today from 1 to 10? And just type it in as we go through that. I'm going to pause before I go into the second one. Okay. All right, I see 7, 9, 8, 6. Great. All right, now let's go to the second one. Helping your clients set coaching goals with, or helping your clients set coaching goals. Where do you think you are? 10, 7s, 7s. That's awesome. 6.5, 8. All right, great. On the third one, assess your client coaching needs and opportunity for coaching. How do you feel you are at? Chris, a 9. Oh, sorry, great. I'm actually glad to see. Okay. All right. Be present in a positive emotional attractor state, PEA. Seven, 9s. Wow, that's awesome. Great. Great. All right, now let's switch to listening. Actively listening to my coachee without interrupting, except when needed. Qualifier. All right, wow. That's good. The 8s and 7s. All right, let's go to providing a safe and confidential space for our client to share openly. How are you doing with that? 9s and 10s. That's great. Okay. Establish a strong, trusting relationship with the coachee. 9s and 10s. Well, seeing those numbers make me proud. So I'm glad. And make a note as we're continue to work on these is which areas you really want to continue to work on with your mentor and even with your circle. All right, design and ask powerful questions. 7, 6, 7s. Yep. 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 Well, today's going to help in that discussions too. Okay, any more numbers? Powerful questions. All right, let's go to 9. Use the you coaching model in your coaching. What is versus what if? Danny, Ryan, 9, 7s, 8, 6s, 9s. Okay. All right. Help my client develop clearer line of sight. That's today. Yep. Much lower. Yep. Okay. I'm assuming if somebody is not posting their numbers, they're going to have a conversation with offline with their mentor. I'm going to have also, we'll send you this so that you're also having that conversation with your mentor. Finally, hold the space during the coaching session. 9, 8, 7, 9, Frank, yep. Amanda, 7, great. And last but not least, be agile and adaptable to my coachee changing needs. That's my biggest challenge always. It's just being agile in that. Okay. Awesome. Thank you for doing this. It's just kind of just a good pulse of where we are. If you really take stock of what you kind of assess and feel where you are at, I think this is, as we're progressing, I'm hoping that you're getting more and more comfortable through that. Anybody wants to make any comments as we were going through this? Any reflections on as you were assessing where you are at in your journey?
This is Galen. The ones I struggle with the most, I feel like I can put out
Galen,
there.
I think you're on mute.
I'm not. You can't hear me?
We
Can't
can
hear.
hear.
I'm
Yeah, we
I'm
can hear
not
you.
I
on.
can hear you. Yep.
Yeah.
You're good.
The ones I struggle with the most, I feel like I can put out there, like, let's talk about your goals for coaching, or and then they say, well, I don't know, I have this employee I'm having trouble dealing with. So I feel like we're making more progress today, obviously, but I feel like I have the words, but it's the getting or asking the good questions. Well, I don't know. I haven't really thought about that yet. So I feel like if I jumped in and said, tell me what you want to be like in 10 or 15 years, that they're like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to get through today. I'm not there yet. So I feel like I need the bridge to how we set that stage, not the words to ask the question. I mean, like, I can put the words out there, and all of them are, one even said, I want to be out of the here and now. It feels like I'm just in the here and now. But then if you ask them to expand beyond that, that takes a whole different mind frame, which I know is part of what we're learning, but it's not that I'm not asking, it's that or another one who's taking a new job, he's like, yeah, it's, I'm gonna have more time, I'll just think about that then. It's the getting people to go there that's a real skill, not the words. So
Yeah. Well, I think it's that's the agility part of, it's never a playbook. It's you're sensing where they are at and how do you really position it into it. And today we're really talking about how do you scale up and down. And so this 3-box coaching model conversation is you scale up and down time horizon based on where your client is. And so we'll talk through that. Any other comments?
I think this is Josh, and sorry, turns out I had to drive during this time, so I couldn't put anything in the chat.
All right.
Similar to Galen's sort of comment or question is, as I was looking at the line of sight stuff, I was having trouble picturing how I would broach it. Like
Mhm.
it feels like it would be fairly prescriptive, which is semi-antithetical to the concept of coaching. And so I'm interested in hearing how you sort of pivot to like, okay, I'm going to recommend now that we look at this line of sight type work.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. And that's the whole positioning is really the conversations, right? And so we're going to kind of walk through how do you really discover, and we'll end the day with how this methods and approach, you use it even in your scoping of a coaching relationship, right? Because at the end of the day, we are on a journey with a client. A client is on the journey, and then we come along. It's just being able to understand what journey are they on, and if it's not clear to them, how do we really clarify? And being able to say, all right, let me just kind of understand where you are, what story are you in? And if they say, well, I don't know, I don't have a story, then that's really the opportunity, right? And so really, how do you kind of always come back to how do I help them and where is the gap so that I can add value? And this three box model, you realize how powerful it is because it applies to everything, whether it's personal, work, business, teams, and then being able to kind of talk through that, and then you scale it up and down is really the how we can work through it. So let's kind of work through that today. Yeah. All right. So let's launch into it. Just from a ground rules perspective, just be open, trust the process. I want to reemphasize psychological safety. This is out of all the topic, this is where this could become personal in the sense of we're putting ourselves out there, we're telling our own story. And I want to make sure that I emphasize psychological safety. I'm going to put out myself out there. I'm going to share with you my personal line of sight so that you can see where it's out there. So I just want to make sure that we emphasize that. Be vulnerable and then just be bold, dream big kind of approach to things. This is always, I come back to this from a coaching perspective as a reminder, is that our coaching relationship is really to support, it's that tugboat. It's the client is already on a journey. It's a matter of how do we come in and tug and just kind of help them along by nudging and not pulling, right? I'm not here to design their story. I'm here to help them discover their story. I'm not here to dictate what their story is. I'm here to just help them discover what it is, right? So I'm always the tugboat and being able to do that. This is what I was referring to, if you recall, when we started this academy, is that the client is on a journey. All of us are on a journey. There's the past, the history, the experiences of what got us to today. And that it gives us an insight into our value, the way we see the world, the shape, our purpose. There's something to be discovered about our past and history. There's a current situations, and sometimes this current situation could be acceptable or could be unacceptable. And it's up to us to really understand what's working and what's not working, and so that we can add value. And then there is a story and a narrative around the future of where is it that they want to go to, right? And this is the one where a lot of people, especially in healthcare, which we are very trained to be very reactive. We don't plan. We don't look into the future. We just kind of go in, survive the day, we're good. And so when you say something to someone, hey, let's look at a long-term vision for yourself, you're going to get that stare. You're going to go like, what? You know, this is not how we function. We're just going to, my vision is to survive today and go home on a decent hour. That's usually what the answers we get. And so it's being able to redefine what is that future, and then why is it important? And this is how we can help them articulate and work through that. And I invite Dan and Dorothy and everyone to chime in as we're going through that. So our role is, as a coach, is to help understand what that story is, that terrain, that strategy. And then our individual conversation, this is where the U model comes in, right? Situation, how do I help you go from a current state to a better state? Current state, better state, current state, better state. And if you really look at, if you talk to your client 10 times, you really are just helping them clarify that story. And then how do you really develop a plan on how you're going to get there, right? And then I'm going to help you go from one state to a current better state. It's never linear. Let's just kind of admit it. It's never linear. I wish it goes linearly like this. Sometimes it's going to go up. Sometimes they're going to have a bad day. Sometimes they're going to go, I don't know. And then, but at least if I can leave you in a better mode, better mood, better thinking, a different way of perspective. I took you from one side of the U to the other side, took you from a negative to a positive, all those things. I feel like I've accomplished my purpose as a coach. Any thoughts or comments? I can't see what I'm presenting faces, so, but I'll pause if anybody wants to add to that. Okay. If not, so this is my favorite model. And I call it the 3-box process, and you can see it on my in my background. But it's this approach of thinking works for everything, as I said, for personal, for work, for business. If I'm engaged in an organization with their strategic plan, it's always a 3-box conversation, right? And so we call it the 3-box coaching. And it's understanding current state of what's working, what's not working, the what is, defining the what if, what is it that we're going after? What is your vision for yourself, your team, your life? What would make you proud? Conversation, and then how we're going to close the gap. And then in the personal mode, there's our value and our purpose. That's always the anchor. So vision will change, current state will change, all of this will change over time. But our value and our purpose are an anchor, and getting clarity on those are important, but they're the hardest part of this whole equation. People have a hard time trying to really filter those and trying to get to clarify that. But once it's clear, it makes it much easier to really kind of have those type of conversation. This is the same model for an organization line of sight. Where are we? Where do we want to go as an organization? How are we going to get there? No different. Anchored by the organization value, anchored by the organizational purpose. A team line of sight, you can see it's not changing, same aspects. Current state, future state, you're going to close the gap. Similar models, we call them the A3 in the lean process. So similar aspect of approaching that. But this 3 boxes conversation is really the approach of how do we apply that and bring it forth to our client. I literally write it on the board with the client in the conversation. I mean, I literally say, let's really understand where you are, where you want to go, and how we're going to get there. And that's how I position. And I'll just draw a picture on the board, or if we're in person, I draw it on a piece of paper. And then start with a blank conversation. And so even even in the personal line of sight, when I coach people for a job and when they're interviewing for a job, I make them write a 3-box story. Here's who I am. Here's my assessment of the situation. Here's where the future state I can get us there. And here's my plan, how we're going to get there. And I make my coachee go with a 1-pager, right? Because they control the narrative. In the interview process, it makes it easier for people to understand who you are, what story are you in, what are you going to add value, how are you going to get there, right? So the 3-box model is a very, very powerful approach to working through that. And our role as a coach is to help the client define them and figure out where the gaps so that we can help them. And then we connect around that. So let me stop here and open conversation around. We had you read a couple pieces, chapter from Debowitz's book, The Purpose-Driven Line of Sight, and then gave you the personal line of sight for you to kind of think through that and work to that. So would love to get some insight and reflection on what I just covered, but also on some of the pre-reading and takeaway.
I love that you don't go out mining. You go out mining for gold, but you know you'll be digging out the dirt. Like most of it will be dirt. But like that whole analogy, like totally resonated with me. You don't go to mine the dirt. You mine the gold, right? But there will be a lot of dirt and other things that you'll discard along the way. That absolutely resonated with me.
Yeah.
I love the Helping People Change book, and it seems like such a guide for how we talk people through things. And it's not goals, it's vision. But man, my 2 outside clients are both new leaders, and they don't have some big grand vision of, not brand new, but in the last year or 2, their vision is not to be COO or anything. They want to, how do I get more confident? How do I settle conflicts? How do I lead my team? And so it seems like they're always asking for skills, which we talk about, but nobody's personal vision is, I want to stop lacking confidence, or I want, so I'm having trouble, like those are very aspirational for, I'm a director and I want to be a chief operating officer and help me get there and I want a new job. But these people are like, man, I'm in a role and I got these couple supervisors reporting to me and I'm trying to figure out what to do. And oh no, 6 people called out sick this week and this is healthcare. I'm reactive. So I'm still bringing the theory to the application of these wide-eyed, really interested leaders. They're totally engaged, but they're like, I don't know how to get there. So I'm having trouble with which is similar to my previous comment. So I love that book. I reread that chapter, but
so this is where in your example, I go to, all right, let's just focus on your current state. Right? All right, here, let's really figure out what's going on, right? What's working, what's not working? How do we work through that, right? I'm not going to go, in this situation, I am not going to go, let's just go aspirational. I'm going to go, let's really just work through that. But then I'm going to shift it at certain point to answering the question is, for the sake of what you want to be a good leader. What is the destination you're taking your team toward? What is it that you want to be known for when 2 years from now as a leader? Right? That's the conversation I would shift to. right? But you're right, it's all sensing and it's all understanding where our client is. In this case, your client is a current state conversation. Let me really work through that with you. But let me just also understand the context of why do you want to be a good leader? What is it that you're going after? Where's you're taking your team? And I move it into from a personal line of sight to a team line of sight conversation and work it that way. Other thoughts, or does that help? Yep.
I think with one of my clients, I've seen exactly what you're describing. We started talking about their new role that they're in, but then as time has gone on, because the situations they're trying to work through and those gaps they're trying to close, it's kind of led to more of a necessity look at what their broader vision is for their career and those kinds of things. But I, like Galen, also have one client that I can't get them out of the here and now. They don't want to go there. And so that's been much more difficult understanding. And I have gotten some great coaching on that before my next meeting with this client from Pauline, but getting them, asking the right questions to kind of get them to go to a different place other than very transactional encounters around just project work or whatever it is they want to keep very surface. So I've seen this kind of both ends of the spectrum with this.
Yeah. Look, it's as long as you keep an eye on where are the 3 boxes and where my client is, right? But our role as a clear examples, right? The reason my clients will struggle with their team is because the lack of vision of where they're taking the team to. So they end up being in the current state, struggling with conflict and project and transactional because there is no context to where are you taking the team to? Do they even know where they're going? So since there's no vision, every day is the same day. There's no aspiration, there's no hope, there's no, right? So that's the conversation. Then it's not about their line of sight. It's about where are you leading your team to the team line of sight? And are you really having in that conversation? And so then by them answering that, then you're helping them solve that. And so your coaching moves from current state to why, for the sake of what, where are you headed? Does that help? Okay.
Danny's got a question. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Frank.
Yeah, hey, Mo, I'm thinking that this requires our client having a growth mindset, that they actually see this future and are growing. And maybe because we're coaching people who are invested in leading and are invested in that, maybe it's not an issue. But do you ever find a client who just doesn't have a growth mindset?
Fixed
This
mindset.
is who I am, and this is the way I'm going to be. How do you respond to that?
I have many clients who are fixed mindsets, right? But you get a sense where the readiness of even pointing out that they are in a fixed mindset because they don't know what they don't know. This is who they are. And so you gotta help them see it, right? And so if they're in a fixed mindset, I am not gonna like trying to push them all the way to something that they're not ready for, right? If they're not ready, then I'm happy to stay here. And my coaching is gonna be just a bunch of views. What state do you have today? What can I get you to a better state tomorrow? It's one you after you after you after you, right? But eventually I'm going to look for the opportunity. I'm going to say, okay, so now that I built trust with you, let me tell you what I see, right? And then I will introduce, hey, you know, the way we've been working through this is very transactional, fixed mindset. Let's talk about a growth mindset. What would that look like? But I'm not going to hit them on the head with it from day one. I'm just going to stay there with them for a while, then when that opportunity. And if it's not, I'm happy to close the engagement with just, not everybody could be helped. Right? We can't fix it all. Pauline.
One of the key things that I appreciate about the model of the 3 boxes is, even if we don't think about them as boxes and we think about them as perhaps chairs or sofas or whatever that might be their station in life, those rooms that they can go into, asking the client, which room are they in at the moment?
Which room?
And inquiring and getting really curious about, which room would you like to be in? Which one is your team in?
Mm-hmm.
And are you both in the same room?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And just go with the same type of analogy that, you know, sort of their team, you know, I've had a lot of these conversations around, you know, remote working and things like that. And the distance in that current situation is that they can't imagine, yes, all of these things are showing up, but what is that underlying question that's keeping me in this room?
Right.
So what keeps me in this room and not in the room of my, you know, where I want to take my team? And so, you know, sort of, I like the boxes, you know, sort of, but, you know, sort of that could have a visceral kind of reaction for folks. Think about them as rooms, think about them as chairs, think about them as backpacks, think about them as, you know, stepping stones, whatever analogy your person is using, what resonates for them can help you get that, you know, sort of, even if, you know, we go down the line of, you know, football, you know, is it a soccer ball? Is it a, you know, a rugby ball, or is it a, you know, sort of an AFL ball, right? So what ball are we using?
Right. Yep.
And which one are we going to kick around the park right now? So use your analogies, use your metaphors, and play with the models in your own language can help you give life to these processes as you step into the conversation.
Right. What about the reading about the 3 phases of career? Because that's like the number one issue that I always find people into thinking about their career as 2 boxes, not 3. And I always go there in the conversation about that. No, there's 3 boxes, there's 3 phases. And are you really thinking about that? Anything resonated in that?
You know, Mo, Ryan here. I talked to my at least my brothers about their engineer computer science. And I think this kind of goes back to fixed mindset or growth mindset.
Yeah.
At least when I talk to my 2 brothers, who I think are pretty well educated, they are very much week to week, month to month, you know, I need to get this done.
Right.
And they get this project done out the front door and I move on to the next thing. And I was talking to them both, and I'm like, well, don't you want to pass something on? How do you want fellow employees to think about you a year after you're gone? And it was like I had 2 heads. They just could not even think about that. But yeah, like for me, like as I hit this magical age of 50, I'm sitting there all the time about, I've learned me. I mean, so I think this really resonates with some people, but maybe into what Frank was saying, I don't know if everyone thinks like this. They just kind of think paycheck to paycheck in some areas.
Yep. Right. And I want to just point out that, look, our role as a coach also is sometimes to be an educator, because people don't know what they don't know. And so sometimes where you put out, like I would send this article ahead of time into the conversation, and I'd say, let's just talk about where you see your career, where you see your phases. Phase 1, you're conquering the world. Phase 2, you're on a treadmill. But that's how we were taught. It's like, then you retire, versus, no, there's a 3rd phase, and it's all about our identity, and it's all about our legacy. and kind of connect with that, and then see if it resonated. If it didn't resonate, then okay, great. It's not a type of conversation to have, but it's an opportunity to just, sometimes our role as a coach is to open the conversation with, and models are a great way to be able to do that, right? Just draw 3 things and just say where we are, how are you thinking about your life, and see where that, and if they're not, they're just saying, I'm just here and I'm just happy I wanted to retire. It's like, okay, great. Let me help you get there. But if
Hey,
not, yes.
I'm here to challenge your thinking a little bit
Sure.
today. I feel like when you present a model, that's advice. I go into these whole things and I write all over my notebook, ask questions, only what questions, stay in questions. I have Michael Bungay Steiner, I have all of you on this. So how do I not present a life plan or a approach? And how is that like, here, let me walk you through this. So I feel like I'm not getting to some of that because I'm so into don't give the answer, don't tell them how to manage their, my world, right? Remember, clinicians, we give advice. So I'm pulling back from that. And then I don't feel like I can teach and instruct like this. So how do you do that from questions?
Well, you didn't hear it from me, because that's not what I subscribe to. I subscribe to a continuum of coaching, right? ICF and everybody else says stay on the process side, just ask questions. Okay, I don't. I subscribe to that continuum where you are a trainer, an educator, an expert, a consultant, all the way to I'm a coach that just talks about process and asks questions. But I'm going to go, and many of you kind of worked with me over the years. You probably saw the whole spectrum, right? And I'm looking at some faces, and right, you saw it. I think as a true coach, it's a sensing and dance. If the client is stuck, I need to be the teacher. If my client is in need of, they can't see it, it's right there, I'm just going to draw a picture and open that opportunity. Challenge me, or other people that were on the receiving end, or the other coaches. Thoughts. I look at it as a continuum. It's never, ICF says process. I don't subscribe to that. I subscribe to, it's a dance. You meet your customer where they are at. Sometimes you're gonna advise, sometimes you're gonna not. But don't be stuck into the advice and then there just becomes advice. That's, I think, the conversation.
So, Galen, one of the things to look at is imagine yourself as an Olympic ski coach. You can outline the slalom course for the skier without giving them a bit of advice as to how they hit it. And that's the idea of a model, is you can tell them you got a straight stretch that's deceptively fast. It goes into a hard left curve, and then it's going to do, another curve to the right and a curve to the left. It's going to, then allow you to pick up speed, but there's a piece there where there's a hill. You come over the hill, and there's going to be an immediate left. That lays out the course. That lays out, the model that they're going to be working within. Now, when you start to say, be careful and lay way over after you get to the bottom of that, that leap, and you do this and you do that, and remember to keep the tips close, and all, now you're giving advice. And they're going to weather it, and they're going to be like, okay, yeah. They're never going to have that feeling if you're just laying out the course and then asking what are their questions, because now they've mapped the terrain. Right now they know, and then this will go right into the line of sight conversation. So that's the difference really between giving advice and doing what Mo is talking about. Is there some advice that gets in? Yeah, absolutely. Caution about that second leap, because you're going to be a foot off the snow And when you come down, it's going to be immediate left. Borders right up against advice.
Just
Right.
um
Go ahead,
just
Paul.
to add on to that, another analogy that comes to mind, Dan, when we think about this is, and if we are talking about ICF and passing an ICF exam or anything like that, or doing the assessment from that lens, right? Think about it in this way. Level 1 is if you're in a car, you're a driver and you're in the driver's seat, right? And you're allowed to get away with, in level 1, some advice monster behaviors and giving models and giving stuff like that. Level 2, which is your PCC coaching, is you're in the passenger seat, right? Where you're a guide on the side and you're helping people work through the model. When you get to the next level, the level 3, which is the MCC level, you're in the back seat and you're in there for the ride, right? And you're in there and you're helping enjoy the terrain that you're navigating. Okay, so think about it from that perspective. You can submit a recording for the levels that you are going for that involve using models, that involve using templates, that involve using assessments, right? Because you're in that coach question mode. And it doesn't mean that you can partition a little bit of teaching, because sometimes you can do that. And even ICF recognize that. At the MCC level assessment, which you're not going for at this particular stage, there's definitely that division. Okay, so you're less in that seat. So think about it as the vehicle that you're in and that you're driving. The level 1 that you're currently going for, and many of you are actually at level 2 when I've heard you coaching, right? And so that's that stretch. So you can do those things in that coaching model. Okay, so ICF is less strict on those things at the moment. They will be strict on the educators. They're less strict on the coaching that we're actually assessing. And I do assessments at both the level 1 and the level 2s. So I would, depending on how you're asking those questions, if you're leading people and the client is saying, I don't want to go here, then of course you're going to fail. If they're not in the same room as you in that way. So, okay, but that's not going to be a situation that you would do. So just practice.
Yeah, and then the questions that Stephanie asked on, yeah, you basically, it's a dance. You're seeing where your client is, and then you determine based on where they're at, how are you going to go about doing that? If they're ready for a stretch conversation, we'll go there. If they're not ready for a stretch conversation, I'm just going to stay along with them, and then I'm just going to stabilize them, right? It's just going to go talk about what's not going well. Okay, great. Let's just talk about that. And then really trying to understand their feeling, and then why are they feeling that way, and where's the team, the dynamic in this situation. And I'll stay in this situation as long as they want. At a certain point, I gotta, hold them up and then see where's going to be a pivot to serve them that way. But models, content, article, tools, all those we're giving you those so that you can use them with your clients when necessary. You send them an article ahead of time. Let's talk about that. Let's send them a tool and say, let's just do an assessment. All those things are your diagnosis and help. It can't be just question and conversation. It's going to be a combination of a lot of things. Raquel.
Hey, Mo, thanks. This is all super insightful and really helpful for me. And I think one thing that jumped out in some of the pre-work for us was just writing the letter to yourself. And I reflected back on when we did that as part of the Leadership Fellowship. And I'm excited to try that with one of my clients who tends to be a little bit, kind of keeping it close. And maybe that's a space for them to have some personal reflection that then might open up for a conversation to say, we're able to do that. What about that letter to yourself might you want to share? So I'm excited to kind of
Yep.
play with it and see if someone will, brain to pen to paper or typing, whatever, if that will kind of help start the conversation. We'll
Yep.
see.
Well, that's why that's why this is my favorite book, is because you're actually doing more than that. You really are opening the positive emotional attractors. The positive chemical, the happy chemicals are opening it up, right? There's more to it than just the activity. There is psychological and physiological process of when you move your client into thinking about something that is not the current state, that vision and then being able to dream opens up a whole opportunities. And us being positive and optimistic and helping them explore those is really where we're being of service to our client. And that's why, he talks about dreams and vision, and how do you really help your client see that and open for that so that you can help them continue to get there. Okay. All right. So now we're going to get into the line of sight, and we're going to practice, work through that demo, all of those. And hopefully you got some reflection time on that. The tool, we sent you the tool ahead of time to kind of answer some of that question, and then with a guide and connections around that. But again, going back to those 3 boxes conversations, right? And then there's the individual questions. This is what's going to be a question for everyone, is where do you start with your client? Do you start in the current state, future state, value, purpose? Where do you start the conversation with the client? Any thoughts?
Yeah, this is Chris. I've struggled with this before. Sometimes seems like it's sort of client driven, but I'm inclined usually to start with desired state, but not too detailed, just to kind of frame the conversation a little bit. And then get into current state and what the gaps are, and then come back to that. I mean, I don't know, it's challenging, but my performance improvement background compels me to start with the goal, with the desired state or the problem or whatever, and then move to current state. I'm thinking DMAIC, quality improvement science. And so it feels odd to me to start with current state with no context. So, because current state relative to what? So I like to start with desired state, but at least at a high level, just to frame why I'm asking the question around current state.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. I think what I find is I always introduce the 3 steps or the 3 phases, right? Or 3 boxes or 3, and then so that they know that there are all of those, and that, hey, well, but if we start here, so they know that there's other area to think about that. But if they feel like, well, no, I'm not ready for this. I really want to talk about what's going on with me, with myself, with my wife, with my family, with all, like, okay, well, let's just start here. So but I always start with drawing it and just say, let's talk about that. Other takes or yes.
One thing that I've noticed is that sometimes the conversations around values and purpose come up, which I think could be a gateway to then like explore those 3 boxes, rooms, etc. for people.
Mhm.
And I think that I've noticed that at least in one client where there is a little bit of insecurity around their own values or a sense of purpose.
Mhm.
And my question for the coaches is like, what is that an area where you often start, or would you first look at that and then expand on these underpinning anchors for this? Or is it a separate conversation?
I'll wait for other answers, and I have an answer, but I'll hold.
That's not your following because we were talking about this other one. So we need to see if we can see any. She thinks it's on this front part. I can't see anything from the back porch either. So
I think somebody's, yeah,
That's, yeah, it's Wes.
okay.
Okay, so that wasn't an answer to Michaela. Michaela, I start by asking the client which room they are in. Where would they like to start? Where would they like to begin? And for them to describe their own state so that I'm not assessing them. I'm not prescribing or not doing anything of that nature. I'm asking them to assess and then reality checking with them. Is that truly where they believe they are? Because some folks believe that they have a strong vision and they don't need to bring it into their current state, right? They have this underlying thing that they've done maybe at university or something like that, and they think that they've got it. What they need to do is reality check it. So what box do they put themselves in immediately? And then coach from there and ask them which one do they want to actually explore next, and how might that help their current situation.
Okay. Michaela, values and purpose are the hardest part out of the whole line of sight. It is the hardest conversation because it's not, for a lot of people, it's not readily available to them. They may have some thoughts about it, but it's the hardest part, and I tend to hold on those and explore, just trying to understand context, and then just kind of ease into that conversation. Out of all of this, if there's 5 components of this: current state, future state, closing the gap, value, and purpose. Purpose is the hardest part of all of them, just because people usually are not clear on discovering what is the purpose, and it takes the longest in the conversation. Then value. Current states is the easiest for everybody. Desired state is kind of in between. And so if I'm working with a client and we're really gonna talk about their line of sight and where are they in their life and career and various domain of concerns, I'm not gonna start with the value and purpose conversation, just because unless there's some kind of a breakdown or things in the current state. Chris.
Yeah, I like Pauline's explanation. I was thinking that this whole 3-box model seems to me that it could be used sort of at the micro level or the larger level, right? You could have mini visions and larger visions. And if we're using the U model, the coaching model, I mean, the first step is when we're asking, what's on your mind today and what are your challenges? Perhaps sometimes the answer to that question leads to what box. They might say, well, I'm struggling with this right now. Or they might say, well, I got this thing that I got to complete in the next 2 years of this program and I'm having a problem. So they might direct us to the right box based on how they depict their challenge.
Yep. Look, the power is the framing. The power is in the framing of being able to say visually to a client, it's a journey and you're on a journey. Let me understand, where are you on the journey? And let me understand, how can I help you? Sometimes it's about defining the journey because they're not clear where they're going. Sometimes it's about where they're at. Sometimes it's a lot of it is about where they came from. And that's why we split this session into two, because the purpose conversation is really going to lead us into going backward and understanding the story and the narrative for the client that leads into a conversation about their purpose and really help shape why they do what they do. And so we didn't want to try to slam everything into one session just because it just takes a lot to get to that. Line of sight conversation is never one time. I've never been able to get anybody through a line of sight conversation in one setting. It's probably 3 or 4 sessions of conversation, easily. So if it's a dance. Dorte, any thoughts or?
Yeah, I definitely think that it's an in and out of these rooms, and not a linear process. I find myself, similar to Pauline, following along with the client where they want to start, and then going back and forth. And I think Lori said that in the chat, that sometimes she even uses this in the orientation, the first kind of chemistry call or whatever you may call that. And then, but leaving it at a very high level and then revisiting on and off to fill in the details of the 3 boxes.
Yep. Look, clarity is kindness, and the value we could add as coaches is to give our client and help our client with clarity. And because it gives all their frustrations or lack of frustrations or burnout or challenges or conflict, everything else is when there's a lack of contacts, then they get caught into the content of the frustrating situation. And our role as a coach is to bring them back out and say, for the sake of what? For the sake of what you're frustrated? For the sake of what you're so passionate about this situation? For the sake of what that you're spending a lot of energy on this? For the sake of what? And if I don't understand the sake of what, and they don't understand the sake of what, then everything is a disaster, or everything is a end of the world conversation, and everything. So then they burn out, right? And so we need to understand and lift them into kind of like, what's behind this? That's the 5th element of the coaching is there's you, there's them, there's the situation, but then there's a terrain and a story behind it. And so what is that narrative? And so that we can bring that into the fold so that they can help them focus their life, their career, their family, all their domain of concerns, and connecting it with that. Okay. All right. So we're going to go into break. And I wanted to bring forth, so the answer to this is depends where to start, but just kind of calibrate that there's components more difficult than others. I'm bringing this back from the book. The conversation is that as even you introduce the process and you're really helping and coaching the client, you want to also balance between, if the current state is not as messy, do I really want to start at the current state? Or do I really want to just tell them I'm not ignoring it, but it's the time, let's just go to the future state because it's going to open up a positive, it's going to get the oxytocin going. An example is when I'm working with a team or I'm working with an organization, and I know there's a lot of messy stuff in the current state. I start immediately into the future state, right? Because I want to I want to get the positive momentum and a positive emotion going. But I'm not saying I'm ignoring. It's like that pragmatic optimism. Let's go optimistic, but then come back to pragmatic. Optimistic, let's come back to pragmatic. And so I bring that up because that's kind of behind these things is you're also trying to manage the emotion into the work through that. So future state is if start with the future state, it's the what if. And what do we think is we become, right? And so this aspect of how do I help my client think through that? This is what I just talked about is when people are in the content and they don't have a context and that there's no meaning to things. If you recall this story about, if you ask someone, what are you doing? It's like, I'm laying out bricks. Look how beautiful my work is. You go to another group and it's like, oh, what is it that you're doing? Oh, I'm building this wall. Look how beautiful this wall is. Look how great where my work is. And you go to third person and say, what is it that you're doing? It's like, oh, I'm building this beautiful cathedral. Look how wonderful my laying out the bricks looks like because we're building this cathedral, right? Those three people are doing the same activity, but one is just seeing the activity, the other person is seeing half of the story, and the other person is seeing the whole story. And so in the personal strategy map is all about that. It's like, what is the cathedral that you're building? What are you going after? So that today's conflict could be narrated or could be calibrated with, is it worth it or not worth it? If today's frustration, is it worth it or not worth it? Well, if I don't know what I'm building, then how do I kind of think through that? Is there a comment or questions? Yeah. Okay. So, as I said, I'm happy to share mine, and I usually share mine with my clients. I put it out there and it's like, oh, if we're going to build trust, I'll put it out there. And so I do use the line of sight for myself, and I kind of share here where I am, here's where I'm going, here's why I do what I do. And, you know, the approach is like, here's the future Mo. It's just like what story I'm in. And I look at it in two different time horizon. I look at it as, here's my endpoint, which is really the famous, you know, what do you want on your tombstone? And for me, it's like, this is what I want to be known for. Loving son, husband, father, and brother who impacted humanity through compassion, leadership, education. This is what I want. This is what I want written. And so that kind of, like, I went all the way to longer horizon of time. And then it's like, okay, if you're going to ask me for what is my vision for shorter horizon of time, like this is what I'm working toward. A Casti Institute somewhere in either beautiful Europe or somewhere, but it's a farm where instead of me going to places, people come to me, and then we can coach a team or couples. But then we added this other layer recently but also pay it forward by developing youth, you know, bring youth to it, let them teach them some leadership so that we can transform the future of our political system or other, you know, government systems. And so that's kind of the story I'm in. And so that gives me guidance of why am I doing coaching? How am I doing coaching? Why am I doing this? How is this whole thing fit together? So that would be in the story, but it gives me context. And I usually share that with my client, right? So they know, like, here's what I'm into, and this is why we're doing what we're doing. So you're going to go into a breakout, but I want to see if there's comments or Wes or Dan, are you guys monitoring the?
I love what Danny just put in there. It brings vision to shoveling. That is so amazing. And what that brought up for me is the stories I grew up with from my grandparents after rebuilding after the war, right? And because they knew they wanted to get back to their lives, and it was fairly easy, right? Because they knew they wanted to rebuild it. They could have stayed in that devastation, but the incentive, what's my incentive for doing what I'm doing today, right? I think that I'm going to steal that, bringing vision to traveling, Danny. That's brilliant.
Yeah. I see some comments. Say more. I mean, what I love about this group is I'm willing to be vulnerable with all of you, and so say more. Does it make sense? Do you see the vision? Do you see how it puts things into why do I get up every morning in a sense of I'm going somewhere, whether it is at the end or whether it is in the next 10 years, like this is what I'm working toward. Yeah, Ryan, in Minnesota will do just fine.
You're always welcome. You know, Mo, I'll just again say it, when listening to you talk, you make it so simple. And Mo knows this about me. I was in a pretty big role in Allina, and it was just not right for me. Like, and I kind of, I'll say, wavered through COVID. COVID kind of drove me there, but drove me from what was true to my core. And my core is I like being a doctor yet. And so I really kind of aligned to going back to, I at least want to practice clinically half time. But anyways, I'm just going there. Like, this is such a simple process. And yet I think I'm introspective a lot. It took me 6 months to get back to what my vision was. And so again, I'm just sharing my thing. I knew it was there. I just couldn't tell I was off. I should have had a coach the last 6 months. But anyways, Mo, just thank you for being vulnerable and just sharing it. You sharing your vision, I think, helps us all see it in us.
Yep. You guys are all welcome and invited to a weekend at the farm. More than a weekend too. All right, well, this is your turn. You're gonna go into a breakout. The way we're gonna do that is we're gonna do like a take one, take two. I'm trying something new with this format. So instead of trying to kind of send you into a breakout and trying to say, okay, you do the coach, you do the coachee, then you switch, and we feel like we're right out of time. So we're gonna do this differently. We're gonna take one of you is gonna be coach, one of you is gonna be coachee. You're gonna you get a feedback from an observer, and then you're gonna come back. We'll debrief, we'll talk about some other approaches, then we'll send you back into take two, because by that time, we all reflected, and then we can try something different. And in take two, you can elect to redo your part, or you can switch and let your partner do their coaching. But it's a practice that I feel will allow us not to rush through things and just allow things to happen. So in this practice is you're going to help your coachee identify their desired state, their vision for themselves. And it's a dance. They may have something, they may not have something. And then if you're the coachee, work with your coach on crafting your vision for yourself, play along, even if you have one, try to refine it, right? Some of you may already have clear, some of you may not. So just kind of let your coach kind of work with you on that, or your colleague. And then the observer kind of gives them feedback at the end, okay? So it's a one-way, one coach to coachee, and you got 15 minutes to do so, okay? You're talking about desired state, future state. What showed up for you? Was it easy? Was it hard? Do you feel it going in circles?
Well, Ryan here, I had the opportunity to meet with Elizabeth, and it was one of the it was so inspiring. She had put so much time into thinking about her future. I just got energized just listening, and it felt like PEA from the beginning, and in such that I actually didn't want to go back to hear her current state, because at least internally I felt that would I think that 24 hours in a day of being awake is not enough for her. And I just love listening to all these amazing things that she has in her mind wanting to do 7 or 8 days from now. And just, at least I'll say for me, I just wanted to help her actually start doing those things now. I actually saw her light up from the beginning, and I want to do this 7 years from now. I just wanted to get into, well, how can we start to incorporate this more into your life now, because you're smiling from the get-go. I'll stop there.
She's still smiling. There's something to be said about really going into the positive emotional attractor state. Because it's easy to talk about what's not working. It's easy to talk about the frustration. And it's sometimes you have to be there just because your client just needs to be there. But also sometimes we may have to break the cycle for the client to just to say, okay, where does the future looks like? What cathedral do you really want to build? So glad that you were able to get there. What else showed up? Coaches, coachees, observers.
Hey, Mo, I'll jump in. I was grateful to have a friend as the person who I was coaching, and Raquel. I was surprised by just how moving it was for me personally to share some of here and participate in some of the things that Raquel shared as we had our conversation. It was impactful and a change agent for me as the coach in that relationship. That caught me off guard a little bit, but it was powerful and pretty cool too. Thanks, Raquel.
So what caught you off guard? The clarity or the vision itself?
I think the depth of the positive emotional attachment that we were able that we had in that conversation,
Mm-hmm.
And how quickly that developed and how moving that was, I think, for me as the coach, in addition to the coachee.
Mm-hmm. That's the mirror neuron conversation we had a few sessions ago, right? It's being able to really kind of build on that and then, connect and energizing. Or sometimes it's not energizing. Sometimes it just depends on where your client is.
Yeah.
How many of you noticed that the client will paint the picture for you if you just let them? Because it's one of the things that we saw in the group I was with, is the client was painting the picture and the whole time is saying, I don't know what the picture is. And as coach, you're sitting there saying, just let her paint it. And then the coach, Amanda, we give credit where credit is due, just reflected on what she was seeing and what she was hearing.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't drive for the clever question. She just really said, this is what I'm hearing you say. And she added these very subtle elements
Mm-hmm.
that allowed Galen to keep painting the picture. And, at a point you get in there, you say, I wonder if she sees the picture that she's painting. And you just got to follow the tapestry. You sit back and you watch the brush move, I guess is the analogy. And I don't know, Amanda, if you felt like that, like you were just watching the brush move, but then she would come back in because you get to a point of, I don't know. And then it's just more reflecting. It sounds like this. It sounds like this. And that restarted the brush to painting more of the canvas or weaving more of the tapestry. It was very beautiful to watch and an extremely good job with what we're trying to do. So nicely done.
Yeah, the analogy in the group I was with Michaela and Leah, the quilt analogy was used, right? And it's like, okay, well, sounds like you got the pieces, what's the quilt and what's the pattern, and so lots of reflection, which was great, into trying to put it back, sometimes rephrasing, but sometimes here's what I hear. Because I think the clients is probably processing into like, well, is this the picture? Well, here's a piece that I heard, here's a piece I heard, here's a piece I heard, and you're trying to help them maybe see pattern. This is the skills of listening comes into play, right? This is the opportunity as a coach, is to just listen 100% and to try and like, well, what is